Imagine a world without cities, without writing, without the very concept of laws governing society. For millennia, humanity wandered, building temporary shelters and living at the mercy of nature. Then, in a narrow strip of land, an unprecedented revolution began. This is the story of Sumer, the land between two rivers, where the foundational pillars of civilization were first erected, forever reshaping the trajectory of human existence. Here, in the heart of Mesopotamia, people dared to dream bigger, build taller, and organize on a scale previously unimaginable. Our journey begins not with grand kings or vast empires, but with the quiet ingenuity of early communities. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived as hunter-gatherers, following animal migrations and the seasonal bounty of the land. It was a precarious existence, dictated by the immediate environment. Then, roughly 12,000 years ago, a monumental shift occurred, the Neolithic Revolution. People began to cultivate plants and domesticate animals, leading to the first permanent settlements. This agricultural revolution transformed human society from nomadic bands into settled communities, laying the groundwork for everything that followed. In the alluvial plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, a region we now call Mesopotamia, this transformation was particularly profound. The annual flooding of these mighty rivers deposited nutrient-rich silt, creating incredibly fertile soil. But this gift came with a challenge. The floods were unpredictable, and the summers were scorching and dry. Survival here demanded collective effort, foresight, and a mastery of the environment. Around 6500 BCE, the earliest identifiable culture in southern Mesopotamia, known as the Ubaid culture, began to thrive. These people were pioneers, transforming marshlands into arable fields through the construction of intricate irrigation canals. This was a monumental undertaking, requiring communal planning and labor on a scale previously unseen. Settlements like Eridu, considered by the Sumerians themselves to be the oldest city, began to coalesce around impressive temple structures. These early temples, built of mud brick, were not merely places of worship. They served as administrative centers, granaries, and focal points for community identity. The Ubaid people developed distinctive painted pottery, sophisticated tools, and an increasing social complexity, evident in their larger settlements and the beginnings of specialized craftsmanship. They were, in essence, the architects of Sumer's future, laying the deep foundations for urban life. But it was in the subsequent Uruk period, roughly from 4100 to 2900 BCE, that the true crucible of civilization ignited. This era represents one of the most astonishing periods of human innovation, giving birth to what we recognize as the world's first cities. The eponymous city of Uruk, nestled on the Euphrates, was the undisputed marvel of its age. By 3200 BCE, Uruk had exploded in size, encompassing an area of over 6 square kilometers and boasting a population estimated at between 50,000 and 80,000 people. To put this in perspective, no other city on Earth would reach this scale for another 1,000 years. Imagine a bustling metropolis, enclosed by massive walls, its skyline dominated by colossal temple complexes, known as ziggurats. These were not modest structures. The Ina and Anu districts of Uruk housed monumental temples that required staggering amounts of organized labor and resources to construct, signaling a society capable of sustained, large-scale public works. The sheer density of people in Uruk, far beyond what simple agricultural villages could support, necessitated an entirely new form of social organization. This urban explosion led to unprecedented levels of specialization. No longer was every family primarily focused on subsistence farming. Instead, society diversified into priests, scribes, administrators, merchants, artisans, and laborers. This division of labor, a hallmark of urbanism, fueled innovation and efficiency, but also created a complex hierarchy. The temple, initially a religious center, became the administrative and economic engine of the city-state. Priests, seen as intermediaries with the gods who controlled the life-giving rivers and fertile lands, managed vast estates, organized labor, and oversaw the distribution of resources. It was this administrative complexity that spurred one of humanity's most profound inventions, writing. The invention of cuneiform, Sumer's most enduring legacy, was not born from a sudden flash of genius, but from the grinding necessity of managing an increasingly complex economy. As Uruk's agricultural surplus grew and its trade networks expanded, the simple clay tokens used to record transactions became insufficient. Around 3400 BCE, scribes began to press reed styluses into wet clay tablets, initially drawing pictograms representing goods or quantities. Over centuries, these pictorial representations evolved into abstract, wedge-shaped signs cuneiform, meaning wedge-shaped. This was more than just a writing system. It was the birth of history itself, allowing for the meticulous recording of laws, contracts, epic poems, and administrative decrees. It transformed human memory from an ephemeral whisper to an indelible imprint, enabling complex governance and the transmission of knowledge across generations. The ability to record and transmit information with such precision underpinned the very structure of their burgeoning society, fundamentally altering the way humans interacted with their world and each other. Beyond writing, the Uruk period saw a flurry of groundbreaking inventions. The wheel, initially used for pottery but quickly adapted for wagons, revolutionized transportation. The plow, drawn by oxen, dramatically increased agricultural efficiency. Cylinder seals, intricate miniature carvings rolled across wet clay, served as a signature, a mark of authority, and a means of identity verification in a society that increasingly valued secure transactions and record-keeping. These small objects offer a window into the daily lives and artistic sensibilities of the Sumerians. The Uruk period was a time of unprecedented growth and innovation, establishing the very concept of the city-state, a self-governing urban center with its surrounding agricultural lands. It was a cultural epoch of immense influence, with Uruk's material culture, architectural styles, and administrative techniques spreading across Mesopotamia and beyond. The vibrant energy and organizational genius of Uruk left an indelible mark. But as this golden age drew to a close, new challenges emerged. The large, unified cultural sphere centered around Uruk began to fragment. The success of urban life sowed the seeds of competition, as other cities began to emulate Uruk's achievements, leading to a landscape of powerful, independent city-states, each vying for supremacy in a land ripe with opportunity and potential conflict. This shift would usher in an era of kings, dynasties, and the first recorded wars, forever changing the political map of Sumer. The golden age of Uruk had established the blueprint for urban life, a grand experiment in human congregation and organization. But this very success, this concentration of power and resources, sowed the seeds of a new era defined not by unified cultural expansion, but by intense competition. What happens when multiple centers of power, each with immense resources and a divine mandate, emerge in close proximity? The answer for Sumer was an era of unprecedented conflict, ambitious dynasties, and the forging of powerful, often warring, city-states. This tumultuous period, known as the early dynastic period, spanning from approximately 2900 to 2350 BCE, represents a dramatic shift in the political and social landscape of Mesopotamia. No longer would one city, like Uruk, dominate the entire region. Instead, Sumer became a mosaic of independent city-states: Lagash, Umma, Kish, Nippur, Eridu, and others, each a sovereign entity, managing its own agricultural lands, canals, and trade routes, and crucially, each led by its own king. This was the dawn of true kingship, a concept that would profoundly shape human governance for millennia. The transition from the Uruk period saw the traditional authority of the temple priesthood gradually cede power to secular leaders. Initially, these leaders, known as Lugals or great men, were military commanders elected in times of crisis to lead armies against rival cities or external threats. But as warfare became more endemic, the temporary authority of the Lugal became permanent. He accumulated power, building palaces, raising standing armies, and establishing hereditary dynasties that claimed legitimacy through divine favor and military prowess. This marked a fundamental departure from the earlier theocratic model, where priests were seen as direct intermediaries with the gods. Now the king was the earthly representative, a protector of his people and their patron deity, wielding both spiritual and temporal power. This shift is vividly illustrated by the archaeological record. Massive defensive walls began to encircle Sumerian cities, a stark testament to the constant threat of intercity conflict. Excavations reveal settlements that were once open and sprawling, now enclosed by formidable fortifications, some rising over 8 meters high. Life within these walls was organized around the palace, the new seat of secular power, and the temple, which retained its religious and economic significance, but now often operated under royal patronage. These city-states were not isolated. They were interconnected through a complex web of trade, diplomacy, and inevitably warfare. Control over fertile land, access to irrigation canals, and lucrative trade routes for precious materials like timber, stone, and metals, resources scarce in the alluvial plains, became flashpoints for conflict. The historical records, painstakingly inscribed on clay tablets, recount these struggles with remarkable detail. One of the most enduring and well-documented rivalries was between the city-states of Lagash and Umma, a conflict that lasted for over a century, primarily over a fertile border territory known as the Gu-Edina, or edge of the plain. The Stele of the Vultures, a fragmented victory monument from Lagash dating to around 2450 BCE, offers a chillingly vivid depiction of early organized warfare. It portrays King Enadam of Lagash leading his disciplined phalanx of spear-wielding soldiers over the bodies of his enemies, while vultures feast on the fallen. This artifact is more than just a historical record. It is a powerful piece of propaganda, celebrating military might and divine sanction for conflict. It provides invaluable insight into the tactical organization, weaponry, and brutal realities of Sumerian warfare. This constant state of conflict had profound social consequences. The need for a standing army gave rise to a professional warrior class. Captives of war were often enslaved, adding to the growing stratified society that included kings, nobles, priests, scribes, artisans, farmers, and the enslaved. The human cost of these incessant wars, the destruction of agricultural lands, and the disruption of trade must have been immense. Yet, even amidst this political fragmentation and warfare, Sumerian civilization continued to flourish intellectually and artistically. The scribal tradition, born in the Uruk period, blossomed. Cuneiform writing evolved further, becoming more versatile and phonetic, used to record not only administrative accounts, but also historical annals, royal hymns, legal pronouncements, and the earliest known works of literature, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, a foundational text that explores themes of friendship, mortality, and the search for meaning. The royal tombs of Ur, discovered in the 1920s by Leonard Woolley, offer a breathtaking glimpse into the wealth, artistic sophistication, and sacrificial rituals of the Sumerian elite around 2600–2500 BCE. These tombs contained astonishing treasures: elaborate gold helmets, daggers, harps inlaid with precious stones, and exquisite cylinder seals. More controversially, they also revealed evidence of death pits, where dozens of attendants, soldiers, and musicians appear to have been ritually sacrificed to accompany their king or queen into the afterlife. Artifacts like the Standard of Ur, a small wooden box inlaid with shell, lapis lazuli, and red limestone, provide a dual narrative. One side depicts war, showing chariots trampling enemies and soldiers presenting captives, while the other side, peace, illustrates a royal banquet, showcasing the bounty of the land and the splendor of court life. These intricate pieces are not merely decorative. They are narrative documents, revealing the values and worldview of Sumerian society, a world that celebrated both military conquest and civic prosperity. Religion remained a central pillar of Sumerian life, even as kings took on greater secular authority. Each city-state had its patron deity, whose temple was the focal point of civic identity and religious devotion. The Sumerians believed their gods were anthropomorphic, often capricious, and intimately involved in human affairs, controlling the forces of nature and the destiny of cities. They had a vast pantheon with Enlil, the god of wind, air, earth, and storms, being particularly revered. The city of Nippur, though often not a major political power, held immense religious significance as the cult center of Enlil, making it a sacred city and a pilgrimage site for all Sumerians, often respected even by warring factions. This shared religious identity, centered around Nippur, offered a fragile thread of cultural unity amidst political disarray. The early dynastic period also saw further advancements in legal thought. While not as comprehensive as later codes, early legal precedents and royal edicts began to be recorded, attempting to bring order and justice to an increasingly complex society. Kings sought to establish themselves not just as warriors, but as upholders of Misarum, justice, and Nana, righteousness, reflecting an evolving concept of governance. Yet this era of fiercely independent city-states, with their constant struggles and shifting alliances, was inherently unstable. The relentless cycle of war and fragile peace, of rise and fall, hinted at a deeper yearning for stability, for a power capable of transcending mere city walls. Sumer was a land of invention, but also of intense, almost pathological division. This fractured landscape, however, was about to be reshaped by an entirely new kind of ambition, one that would redefine the very nature of empire and challenge the independence that had characterized Sumer for centuries. The fractured landscape of Sumer, a mosaic of independent and often warring city-states, seemed destined for perpetual strife. Each urban center, fiercely proud and devoted to its patron deity, resisted any overarching authority. Yet the very instability this division fostered inadvertently paved the way for a revolutionary concept: empire. Who among these squabbling kings, priests, and warriors could possibly unite such disparate entities? The answer came not from the heartland of Sumer, but from a figure who rose from obscurity, shattering precedents and forging a realm unlike any seen before. His name was Sargon, and his ambition would forever redraw the political map of Mesopotamia, leaving an indelible mark on the course of human history around 2334 BCE. A man of humble beginnings seized control of Kish, one of Sumer's most ancient and revered cities. Sargon, whose name in Akkadian means legitimate king, famously claimed to have been a cupbearer to the previous king of Kish before orchestrating a coup. His origins are shrouded in legend, with tales speaking of him being set adrift in a basket on the Euphrates, a Mesopotamian Moses, to be found and raised by a gardener. Whether myth or fact, this narrative underscored his rise from nothing to absolute power, a testament to his extraordinary charisma and military genius. Unlike the Sumerian Lugals, who traditionally derived their authority from their city's patron god and their ability to protect their people, Sargon's vision transcended the city-state. He was not Sumerian, but an Akkadian speaker from the northern reaches of Mesopotamia, and he sought to build a realm based not on ancient civic loyalties, but on personal allegiance and centralized control. Sargon swiftly established a new capital, Akkad, its exact location still lost to history, but believed to be near modern-day Baghdad. From this strategic center, he launched a series of relentless military campaigns. His strategy was brutal and effective: conquer, dismantle existing political structures, and impose his own rule. He systematically defeated the independent Sumerian city-states, one after another, from Ur and Lagash in the south to Mari in the north, and even extending his reach into Elam, modern-day Iran and Syria. Historical texts recount Sargon's legendary battles, speaking of armies numbering in the thousands and the devastating effectiveness of his tactics. He broke the long-standing tradition of city-state autonomy, melting down their defensive walls and appointing loyal Akkadian governors, rather than local elites, to administer the conquered territories. This was a radical departure, a conscious effort to erase regional identities and forge a unified empire under a single authority. The Akkadian Empire, under Sargon, was the first true empire in recorded history, a vast multicultural entity stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. It ushered in an era of unprecedented centralization. Sargon established a sophisticated administrative system, standardizing weights and measures across his vast domain to facilitate trade and taxation. He created a unified calendar and even a rudimentary postal service, enabling swift communication across the sprawling empire. This was not just about military conquest. It was about forging a cohesive economic and political unit. The immense agricultural wealth of Sumer, coupled with resources flowing in from conquered territories, fueled Akkad's prosperity and allowed for ambitious building projects and a flourishing of new artistic styles. Art and architecture of the Akkadian period reflect this new imperial ethos, gone with the humble, stylized forms of earlier Sumerian art. Akkadian art celebrated the king as the supreme ruler, a divine figure of immense power. The famous bronze head of an Akkadian ruler, often attributed to Sargon himself, is a masterpiece of early metallurgy, depicting a regal figure with intricate braided hair and a commanding gaze, a stark departure from the more abstract representations of earlier rulers. Royal stelae, carved stone monuments, depicted the king as a victorious warrior, trampling his enemies, often towering over his subjects. This art was a deliberate form of imperial propaganda, designed to project an image of unstoppable power and divine favor, reinforcing the legitimacy of a ruler whose authority derived from conquest rather than ancient lineage within a specific city. The Akkadian language, related to later Semitic languages like Hebrew and Arabic, rose to prominence during Sargon's reign. While Sumerian continued to be used for religious and scholarly purposes, Akkadian became the language of administration and imperial communication. Scribes were trained in both, creating a bilingual culture that enriched Mesopotamian intellectual life. The very act of writing, refined by Sumerians, was now adapted to serve the grand ambitions of empire, recording royal edicts, chronicles of conquest, and the intricate bureaucracy required to manage such a vast territory. Sargon's dynasty endured for over a century, with his sons and grandsons inheriting the imperial mantle. The most formidable successor was Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, who reigned from approximately 2254 to 2218 BCE. Naram-Sin not only maintained the empire but expanded it further, extending Akkadian influence deeper into Anatolia and the Levant. But his reign is perhaps most significant for a truly revolutionary step. He was the first Mesopotamian ruler to declare himself divine. He adopted the title King of the Four Quarters, signifying universal dominion, and had himself depicted with the horned crown traditionally reserved for gods. The iconic stele of Naram-Sin depicts him ascending a mountain, towering over his defeated enemies, wearing the divine horned helmet, with stars above symbolizing the gods sanctioning his rule. This bold claim of divine kingship was a radical break from Sumerian tradition, where kings were merely representatives of the gods. Naram-Sin claimed direct divinity, placing himself above even the most revered city gods, a move that undoubtedly solidified his power, but also sowed seeds of resentment among the traditionally pious Sumerians. However, the very vastness of the Akkadian Empire, built on conquest and centralized power, contained the seeds of its own destruction. Holding together such a diverse collection of city-states, each with its own history, language, and patron deities, proved to be an immense challenge. Rebellions were constant, particularly from the fiercely independent Sumerian cities that chafed under Akkadian rule. Naram-Sin himself faced massive revolts during his reign, testament to the ongoing resistance. Furthermore, external pressures mounted. From the Zagros Mountains to the east, nomadic peoples known as the Gutians began to raid the empire's fringes, a persistent and increasingly destructive threat. By the end of Naram-Sin's reign and the subsequent rule of his son Shar-Kali-Shari, the empire began to unravel. Climate change may also have played a role, with evidence suggesting a prolonged drought around 2200 BCE, exacerbating internal strife and weakening the central authority's ability to provide for its vast population. The Gutians, often described in Sumerian texts as a barbarous horde, exploited this weakness, launching devastating incursions that crippled Akkad. Around 2154 BCE, the Akkadian Empire collapsed. Its great capital, Akkad, was sacked and destroyed, so thoroughly that its ruins have never been definitively found. The fall of Akkad plunged Mesopotamia into a period of relative chaos, often referred to as a Dark Age. With the central authority gone, trade networks fractured, agriculture suffered, and independent city-states re-emerged, albeit under the shadow of Gutian domination in parts of Sumer. The memory of the Akkadian Empire, however, did not vanish. It left an enduring legacy. The concept of empire, the power of a unified state, and the precedent of divine kingship would profoundly influence future Mesopotamian rulers. Yet, even as the Akkadian dream faded, the resilient spirit of Sumerian civilization endured. From the ashes of imperial collapse, and after a period of fragmentation, the Sumerian people would experience a remarkable resurgence, a final golden age that would celebrate their unique cultural heritage before their ultimate decline. The stage was set for a powerful Sumerian renaissance, demonstrating the enduring strength of a civilization that had already given the world so much. Could a civilization, after enduring a century of foreign domination and political disarray, reclaim its former glory and even surpass it? This was the monumental question facing the Sumerian people after the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, around 2154 BCE. The ensuing period, often bleakly referred to as the Gutian Dark Age, saw Mesopotamia fractured and vulnerable. With the centralized power of Akkad gone, trade faltered, irrigation systems fell into disrepair, and the land suffered under the raids of the Gutians, a mountain people described by Sumerian scribes as an unfettered horde and dragon people, who brought chaos rather than coherent governance. But this era of instability, paradoxically, fueled a powerful resurgence of Sumerian identity and ambition, leading to a final, brilliant epoch known as the Third Dynasty of Ur, or the Ur III period. The seeds of this Sumerian renaissance were sown in the city of Uruk, where, around 2119 BCE, a king named Udu-Hegel rallied the Sumerian cities against the Gutian oppressors. His victory over the Gutian king Tiragan was a pivotal moment, reigniting hope and paving the way for a new Sumerian hegemony. Following this liberation, the mantle of leadership swiftly passed to Ur-Namma, a former general of Udu-Hegel, who founded the Third Dynasty of Ur around 2112 BCE. Ur-Namma was a visionary ruler who understood that simply expelling the Gutians was not enough. Sumer needed to be reunified and rebuilt on a foundation of order and justice. He embarked on ambitious campaigns to consolidate control, not just over the core Sumerian cities, but also extending his influence north into Assyria and east into Elam. Unlike Sargon's Akkad, which imposed foreign rule, Ur-Namma sought to restore Sumerian traditions and establish a cohesive, centrally administered state under Sumerian leadership. His reign marked a deliberate return to the glorification of Sumerian language, culture, and religious practices. Ur-Namma's most enduring legacy, however, might be his legal reforms. He promulgated the Code of Ur-Namma, the oldest known law code in human history, predating Hammurabi's famous code by several centuries. This collection of laws aimed to establish social order, protect the vulnerable, and ensure justice throughout his realm, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of governance. It provided a stable legal framework that fostered economic recovery and social cohesion. After the preceding decades of chaos, the Ur III state was an administrative marvel, arguably the most highly centralized and bureaucratic empire Mesopotamia had ever seen. Its meticulous organization extended to every aspect of life. A complex system of taxation and tribute, known as the Bala system, ensured that resources flowed from the various provinces to the capital at Ur, and were then redistributed to support public works, religious institutions, and the vast imperial administration. Tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets from this period survive, providing an unparalleled insight into the daily workings of this intricate bureaucracy. These records detail everything from grain disbursements and animal inventories to labor assignments and judicial rulings, painting a vivid picture of a state deeply involved in the economic lives of its citizens economically. The Ur III period was a time of immense prosperity. Ur-Namma initiated a massive building program, restoring temples and ziggurats across Sumer that had fallen into disrepair during the Gutian period. The most famous example is the Great Ziggurat of Ur, a colossal terraced temple dedicated to the moon god Nana, which stands today as one of the best preserved and most iconic structures of ancient Mesopotamia. These monumental constructions not only served religious purposes, but also acted as powerful symbols of renewed Sumerian pride and royal authority. Irrigation canals were repaired and expanded, leading to a dramatic increase in agricultural output, the lifeblood of the empire. Trade networks, disrupted by the Gutians, were re-established and secured, bringing in precious timber, stones, and metals from distant lands, fueling an explosion of craftsmanship and artistic production. The cultural revival was equally profound. While Akkadian remained spoken, Sumerian was actively promoted as the official language of the state and became the vehicle for a new flourishing of literature, including royal hymns, epic narratives, and scholarly texts. Scribes were rigorously trained in specialized schools, becoming the backbone of the empire's administration and intellectual life. The art of this period, while showing some Akkadian influence, often returned to a more serene and pious Sumerian aesthetic, with kings depicted as devout servants of the gods and benevolent shepherds of their people, a subtle but significant departure from the overall. Why militaristic Akkadian imperial propaganda son, Shulgi, who reigned for an extraordinary 48 years c. 2094 to 2047 BCE, brought the Ur-3 Empire to its zenith. Shulgi built upon his father's foundations, further centralizing the state and refining its administrative machinery. He standardized the weights and measures even more rigorously, implemented a unified calendar, and reformed the judicial system. Shulgi was a patron of education and a prolific writer, even claiming to have mastered the scribble arts himself. In a bold move, he followed Naram-Sin's precedent by declaring himself divine during his lifetime, a decision that cemented his absolute authority, but also demonstrated his immense power within the traditional Sumerian religious framework. He cultivated an image as a wise and powerful ruler, a warrior, a builder, and a god, celebrated in numerous royal hymns that depicted him as a divine shepherd leading his flock under Shulgi. The Ur-3 Empire expanded its influence. NCE, securing its borders and undertaking military campaigns to protect vital trade routes and agricultural lands. However, the very forces that enabled this golden age also contained the seeds of its eventual decline. The sheer scale and complexity of the centralized bureaucracy were immense, requiring vast resources to maintain. The relentless demands of the Bala system, while efficient, placed a heavy burden on the provinces. Moreover, new external threats began to emerge, most notably from the west, where nomadic groups known as the Amorites began to exert increasing pressure along the empire's frontiers. To counter this, Shulgi ordered the construction of a massive defensive wall, stretching hundreds of kilometers, known as the Wall of Mardu, or Wall to keep out the Amorites yet. This monumental effort underscored a growing vulnerability. The Ur-3 Empire, despite its sophisticated administration and military prowess, was becoming overstretched, its resources finite, and its borders increasingly porous. This final, magnificent flowering of Sumerian civilization, a testament to its enduring ingenuity and cultural depth, found itself facing challenges that would ultimately prove insurmountable. The stage was set for a new era of decline, as the resilient Sumerian spirit faced its ultimate test against a backdrop of encroaching peoples and shifting regional power. The great cities of Sumer had one last, glorious chapter, but the winds of change were already blowing across Mesopotamia, heralding a future where Sumerian political dominance would finally be eclipsed. Could a civilization, after enduring a century of foreign domination and political disarray, reclaim its former glory and even surpass it? This was the monumental question facing the Sumerian people after the collapse of the Akkadian Empire around 2154 BCE. The ensuing period, often bleakly referred to as the Gutian Dark Age, saw Mesopotamia fractured and vulnerable. With the centralized power of Akkad gone, trade faltered, irrigation systems fell into disrepair, and the land suffered under the raids of the Gutians, a mountain people described by Sumerian scribes as an unfettered horde and dragon people, who brought chaos rather than coherent governance. But this era of instability, paradoxically, fueled a powerful resurgence of Sumerian identity and ambition, leading to a final, brilliant epoch known as the Third Dynasty of Ur, or the Ur-3 period. The seeds of this Sumerian renaissance were sown in the city of Uruk, where, around 2119 BCE, a king named Udu-Hegel rallied the Sumerian cities against the Gutian oppressors. His victory over the Gutian king Tiragan was a pivotal moment, reigniting hope and paving the way for a new Sumerian hegemony. Following this liberation, the mantle of leadership swiftly passed to Ur-Namma, a former general of Udu-Hegel, who founded the Third Dynasty of Ur around 2112 BCE. Ur-Namma was a visionary ruler who understood that simply expelling the Gutians was not enough. Sumer needed to be reunified and rebuilt on a foundation of order and justice. He embarked on ambitious campaigns to consolidate control, not just over the core Sumerian cities, but also extending his influence north into Assyria and east into Elam. Unlike Sargon's Akkad, which imposed foreign rule, Ur-Namma sought to restore Sumerian traditions and establish a cohesive, centrally administered state under Sumerian leadership. His reign marked a deliberate return to the glorification of Sumerian language, culture, and religious practices. Ur-Namma's most enduring legacy, however, might be his legal reforms. He promulgated the Code of Ur-Namma, the oldest known law code in human history, predating Hammurabi's famous code by several centuries. This collection of laws aimed to establish social order, protect the vulnerable, and ensure justice throughout his realm, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of governance. It provided a stable legal framework that fostered economic recovery and social cohesion. After the preceding decades of chaos, the Ur-3 state was an administrative marvel, arguably the most highly centralized and bureaucratic empire Mesopotamia had ever seen. Its meticulous organization extended to every aspect of life. A complex system of taxation and tribute, known as the Bala system, ensured that resources flowed from the various provinces to the capital at Ur, and were then redistributed to support public works, religious institutions, and the vast imperial administration. Tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets from this period survive, providing an unparalleled insight into the daily workings of this intricate bureaucracy. These records detail everything from grain disbursements and animal inventories to labor assignments and judicial rulings, painting a vivid picture of a state deeply involved in the economic lives of its citizens economically. The Ur-3 period was a time of immense prosperity. Ur-Namma initiated a massive building program, restoring temples and ziggurats across Sumer that had fallen into disrepair during the Gutian period. The most famous example is the Great Ziggurat of Ur, a colossal terrace temple dedicated to the moon god Nana, which stands today as one of the best preserved and most iconic structures of ancient Mesopotamia. These monumental constructions not only served religious purposes, but also acted as powerful symbols of renewed Sumerian pride and royal authority. Irrigation canals were repaired and expanded, leading to a dramatic increase in agricultural output, the lifeblood of the empire. Trade networks, disrupted by the Gutians, were re-established and secured, bringing in precious timber, stones, and metals from distant lands, fueling an explosion of craftsmanship and artistic production. The cultural revival was equally profound. While Akkadian remained spoken, Sumerian was actively promoted as the official language of the state and became the vehicle for a new flourishing of literature, including royal hymns, epic narratives, and scholarly texts. Scribes were rigorously trained in specialized schools, becoming the backbone of the empire's administration and intellectual life. The art of this period, while showing some Akkadian influence, often returned to a more serene and pious Sumerian aesthetic, with kings depicted as devout servants of the gods and benevolent shepherds of their people, a subtle but significant departure from the overall. Why militaristic Akkadian imperial propaganda son, Shulgi, who reigned for an extraordinary 48 years c. 2094 to 2047 BCE, brought the Ur-3 Empire to its zenith. Shulgi built upon his father's foundations, further centralizing the state and refining its administrative machinery. He standardized the weights and measures even more rigorously, implemented a unified calendar, and reformed the judicial system. Shulgi was a patron of education and a prolific writer, even claiming to have mastered the scribble arts himself. In a bold move, he followed Naram-Sin's precedent by declaring himself divine during his lifetime, a decision that cemented his absolute authority, but also demonstrated his immense power within the traditional Sumerian religious framework. He cultivated an image as a wise and powerful ruler, a warrior, a builder, and a god, celebrated in numerous royal hymns that depicted him as a divine shepherd leading his flock under Shulgi. The Ur-3 Empire expanded its influence. NCE, securing its borders and undertaking military campaigns to protect vital trade routes and agricultural lands. However, the very forces that enabled this golden age also contained the seeds of its eventual decline. The sheer scale and complexity of the centralized bureaucracy were immense, requiring vast resources to maintain. The relentless demands of the Bala system, while efficient, placed a heavy burden on the provinces. Moreover, new external threats began to emerge, most notably from the west, where nomadic groups known as the Amorites began to exert increasing pressure along the empire's frontiers. To counter this, Shulgi ordered the construction of a massive defensive wall, stretching hundreds of kilometers, known as the Wall of Mardu, or Wall to keep out the Amorites yet. This monumental effort underscored a growing vulnerability. The Ur-3 Empire, despite its sophisticated administration and military prowess, was becoming overstretched, its resources finite, and its borders increasingly porous. This final, magnificent flowering of Sumerian civilization, a testament to its enduring ingenuity and cultural depth, found itself facing challenges that would ultimately prove insurmountable. The stage was set for a new era of decline, as the resilient Sumerian spirit faced its ultimate test against a backdrop of encroaching peoples and shifting regional power. The great cities of Sumer had one last, glorious chapter, but the winds of change were already blowing across Mesopotamia, heralding a future where Sumerian political dominance would finally be eclipsed. The decline of Ur-3 was not a sudden collapse, but a protracted unraveling, exacerbated by a cruel confluence of factors. The mighty Wall of Mardu, built to keep out the Amorites, proved insufficient against the persistent infiltrations of these Semitic-speaking nomadic groups who gradually settled within Sumerian territory. These Amorites were not an invading army in the traditional sense, but a steady migration that chipped away at the empire's coherence. Simultaneously, the Bala system, once the engine of prosperity, became an unbearable burden. Provinces struggled under heavy taxation, leading to resentment and localized rebellions that further strained central resources. Critical to this vulnerability was a series of severe environmental challenges. Archaeological and paleoclimate data suggest a prolonged and devastating drought-gripped Mesopotamia around 2000 BCE. This catastrophic lack of rainfall led to widespread crop failures, famine, and population displacement. The intricate irrigation systems, the very foundation of Sumerian prosperity, could not function without sufficient water from the Tigris and Euphrates, leading to social unrest and a weakened state unable to defend its borders or feed its people. The final blow came from the east. While the Three kings struggled with internal dissent and Amorite pressure, the kingdom of Elam, situated in modern-day Iran and a traditional rival, saw an opportunity. Around 2004 BCE, a combined force of Elamites and Amorites launched a decisive invasion. The capital city of a beacon of civilization for centuries, fell. The destruction was comprehensive and brutal. Temples were plundered, buildings razed, and the population suffered immensely. The catastrophic fall of was immortalized in heart-wrenching Sumerian literary compositions known as laments, particularly the lament for These texts convey a profound sense of despair and loss, describing a city brought to ruins, its people scattered, and its gods abandoning their temples. Is destroyed, bitter is its lament, reads one passage, echoing the profound human tragedy that marked the end of Sumer's final golden age. The fall of III plunged Mesopotamia into another period of political fragmentation, often called the Isin-Larsa period, lasting from roughly 2004 to 1750 BCE. With the central authority of gone, numerous city-states reasserted their independence, and new dynasties emerged, many of them founded by Amorite tribal leaders who had assimilated into Sumerian culture. Two cities, Isin and Larsa, initially rose to prominence, vying for control of the Sumerian heartland. Isin, claiming to be the legitimate successor to initially inherited much of its administrative apparatus and cultural prestige. Its kings continued to commission Sumerian literature and uphold Sumerian traditions. However, Larsa, under powerful Amorite rulers like Gungunum and Rimsin I, gradually eclipsed Isin. Rimsin I, who ruled for an astonishing 60 years, expanded Larsa's control over vital irrigation systems and trade routes, systematically defeating rivals and solidifying Larsa's hegemony over much of Sumer. Although led by Amorite kings, these new city-states continued to use Sumerian as a literary and religious language, a testament to its enduring cultural prestige, even as Akkadian became increasingly dominant in everyday speech and administration. This era was characterized by a return to the competitive city-state model, reminiscent of the early dynastic period, albeit with a stronger emphasis on individual kings and less on divine city patronage. Wars over canals, trade, and regional dominance were constant, preventing any single power from truly unifying Mesopotamia. This fragmented landscape, however, was once again ripe for unification, but this time from an unexpected quarter. In the city of Babylon, a relatively minor Amorite-led city-state located on the Euphrates to the north of Sumer, a new force was gathering. It was here, in 1792 BCE, that a cunning and ambitious king named Hammurabi ascended to the throne. For the first 2 decades of his reign, Hammurabi focused on internal development, solidifying his control over Babylon's immediate territory and improving its infrastructure. But he harbored a grander vision, one that would redefine the political map of Mesopotamia and bring a decisive end to Sumerian political autonomy using a brilliant combination of military prowess, shrewd diplomacy, and opportunistic alliances. Hammurabi systematically dismantled the existing powers. He first turned against Larsa, then against Eshnunna to the east, and finally against the powerful kingdom of Mari to the north, which had been his ally against Elam. One by one, the independent city-states, including the last vestiges of Sumerian political power in the south, fell under his sway. By around 1750 BCE, Hammurabi had forged a vast empire, stretching from the Persian Gulf to the upper reaches of the Tigris and Euphrates, an empire built on a foundation of centralized rule and a standardized legal system, enshrined in his famous code of Hammurabi with Hammurabi's conquests. The long and storied history of Sumerian political independence effectively came to an end. The cities of Sumer, once sovereign and self-governing, were now provinces within a larger Babylonian empire. While Sumerian language and culture would continue to profoundly influence the succeeding civilizations of Mesopotamia, for centuries revered as a classical tongue, its literature copied and studied in scribble schools, its political and military might had been irrevocably superseded. The cradle of civilization, the land where kingship was born and cities first rose, had seen its own kingship and urban autonomy finally extinguished, absorbed into a new order. The legacy, however, was just beginning. Could a civilization truly perish when its political heart ceases to beat? Or does its spirit, its foundational achievements, live on, woven into the very fabric of those who follow? For Sumer, the answer is a resounding affirmation of legacy. With the absorption of the Sumerian city-states into Hammurabi's burgeoning Babylonian Empire around 1750 BCE, the era of Sumerian political independence definitively ended. The royal lines that had reigned for millennia were extinguished, and the vibrant autonomy of cities like and Lagash became a memory. Yet this was not an abrupt cultural death, but rather a profound metamorphosis. Sumerian civilization, far from disappearing, became the enduring bedrock upon which all subsequent Mesopotamian cultures would build, its ideas and innovations permeating every aspect of their successors' lives. The most immediate and profound continuity was linguistic. While Akkadian, a Semitic language, had increasingly gained prominence since Sargon's empire and became the dominant spoken language under Hammurabi, Sumerian did not vanish. Instead, it ascended to the status of a classical, liturgical, and scholarly language, much like Latin in medieval Europe or Sanskrit in ancient India. For over 2 millennia after the fall of Ur-3, Sumerian was meticulously copied, studied, and preserved in scribble schools, known as edubas or tablet houses, across Mesopotamia. Future kings, from Babylonians to Assyrians, would commission copies of ancient Sumerian texts, believing that to engage with the language of the first civilization was to tap into a deeper, sacred wisdom. Scribes were trained in elaborate bilingual curricula, mastering both Akkadian and Sumerian, painstakingly creating dictionaries, grammar texts, lexical lists, and literary commentaries. This dedication ensured that the vast corpus of Sumerian literature, from epic poems and myths to royal hymns, wisdom texts, proverb collections, incantations, and omens, survived, continuing to influence the intellectual and spiritual landscape of the Near East. The prestige of Sumerian was such that even Akkadian kings would pen hymns in the ancient tongue, linking their reigns to the revered past. Beyond language, the institutional frameworks established by the Sumerians proved remarkably resilient. The sophisticated bureaucratic administration perfected during the Ur-3 period, with its centralized control, standardized record-keeping, and complex taxation systems like the Bala, served as a blueprint for the Babylonian and Assyrian empires. Hammurabi's famous law code, while uniquely Babylonian and tailored to his specific societal context, drew heavily upon the legal precedents and even the structural format set by earlier Sumerian rulers like Ur-Namma and Lipitishtir. Concepts of justice, property rights, family law, and punitive measures, first articulated in Sumerian legal texts, found their way into later codes, demonstrating a deep continuity in legal thought. Even the fundamental concept of kingship, its divine legitimization, and the king's role as a benevolent shepherd of his people, inherited from Sumerian lugals, continued to define Mesopotamian rulers for centuries, shaping their self-perception and their relationship with their subjects. The religious landscape of Mesopotamia also bore an indelible Sumerian imprint. While Babylonian and Assyrian pantheons introduced new principal deities like Marduk of Babylon and Ashur of Assyria, many Sumerian gods were adopted, syncretized, or recognized under Akkadian names. The Sumerian sky god became Anu. Enlil, the lord of wind and storm, became Bel. Enki, the god of water and wisdom, became E. And the beloved goddess Inanna transformed into Ishtar, retaining much of her fierce, multifaceted personality as goddess of love, war, and fertility. Their myths, cult practices, and the very architecture of their worship, the towering ziggurats, were all fundamentally Sumerian in origin. These monumental stepped temples, initially Sumerian innovations designed as cosmic mountains connecting heaven and earth, continue to be constructed and revered by subsequent empires, symbolizing the enduring connection between earthly rulers and cosmic powers. The Sumerian cosmology, with its detailed pantheon and stories of creation, the organization of the cosmos, and the delicate balance between gods and humanity, provided a foundational narrative that informed the religious beliefs of the entire region for millennia. Perhaps one of Sumer's most enduring, yet often unseen, legacies lies in the realm of science and technology. The Sumerians' ingenious innovations in mathematics, astronomy, and engineering formed the intellectual bedrock for later Mesopotamian advancements. Their sexage symbol, or base 60 number system, which gave us the 60-second minute, the 60-minute hour, and the 360-degree circle, persisted throughout Mesopotamian history and was later adopted by the Greeks, eventually influencing our modern measurement of time and angles. Sumerian scribes developed sophisticated methods for area calculation, basic algebra, reciprocal pairs, multiplication tables, and geometric principles that were crucial for architectural design, land surveying, and complex irrigation planning. In astronomy, their meticulous observations of the heavens led to the development of a lunar calendar, the identification of constellations, and the ability to predict celestial events, knowledge essential for timing agricultural cycles and religious festivals. These astronomical tables and mathematical techniques were carefully preserved and expanded upon by Babylonian scholars, who would become renowned for their advancements in observational astronomy and the development of early astrological omens. The Epic of Gilgamesh, originally a series of Sumerian poems about the legendary king of Uruk, stands as the earliest surviving great work of literature and a testament to Sumerian literary genius. Transmitted and translated into Akkadian, and eventually widely circulated across the ancient Near East in versions found from Anatolia to the Levant, its themes of friendship, loss, the quest for immortality, and humanity's struggle against inevit. Able death resonated deeply across cultures. The story of a great flood, famously recounted within the epic, bears striking parallels to later flood narratives found in other cultures, including the biblical account of Noah. This monumental work not only shaped Mesopotamian storytelling for centuries, but also provided a profound philosophical exploration of the human condition, making it one of the most influential texts in ancient history, a timeless narrative exploring humanity's deepest fears and desires. The very concept of the city, of organized urban living with its specialized labor, complex governance, and monumental public works, remained fundamentally Sumerian. From Uruk's massive walls to Ur's meticulously planned districts, Sumerians laid out the template for urban design and administration. Later Babylonian and Assyrian cities, though grander in scale and often more militarily formidable, followed these ancient blueprints, leveraging the same principles of water management, defensive architecture, and civic organization that Sumerian engineers had pioneered millennia before. The intricate network of canals, a Sumerian invention vital for agricultural surplus and urban sustenance, was maintained and expanded by successive empires, a constant reminder of the fundamental environmental mastery first achieved by the people of the Twin Rivers. This continuity in urban planning and infrastructure demonstrates how deep the Sumerian roots truly ran in the Mesopotamian landscape. As the centuries passed, the Sumerian language gradually faded as a spoken tongue, assimilated into the broader Semitic linguistic landscape of Mesopotamia. The people who identified purely as Sumerian became indistinguishable from the Akkadian-speaking and later Amorite populations. It was a gradual cultural blending, a testament to the powerful influence of a dominant language and the shared experience of living in the same land. By the middle of the second millennium BCE, Sumerian had essentially become a dead language, reserved for priests, scholars, and royal pronouncements, yet it continued to transmit its intellectual and spiritual heritage to new generations. The vibrant Sumerian identity, once a defining force, dissolved into the rich tapestry of Mesopotamian civilization, like a stream flowing into a mighty river, its waters merging but its source remaining eternally significant. This absorption wasn't an eradication, but a transformation, allowing Sumerian achievements to live on in new forms and new voices, making them universal across the ancient Near East. What then was the ultimate fate of this pioneering civilization? Its physical remains lay buried for millennia, forgotten by all but the dust of ages, waiting for a new era of discovery. But its ideas, its inventions, its foundational texts, and its very way of organizing human life continued to echo through the corridors of time. The Sumerians, through their relentless innovation and profound cultural output, had effectively created the grammar of civilization, providing the essential vocabulary that allowed subsequent empires to write their own stories. Their contributions were not merely adopted. They became integral to the identity and achievements of Babylonian, Assyrian, and even later Western civilizations, often without direct attribution to their true originators. The seemingly quiet cessation of their political independence was, in fact, the loud beginning of their immortal legacy, setting the stage for one final, monumental chapter: their rediscovery and recognition in the modern world, a story that would finally unveil the hidden genesis of so much that we take for granted today. How could a civilization that birthed cities, writing, and the very concept of law simply vanish, its name lost to memory for nearly 2 millennia? For centuries after its political absorption into Hammurabi's empire, Sumerian cities, once bustling centers of innovation, slowly succumbed to the relentless march of time and sand. Their monumental ziggurats became little more than weathered hills, their vast archives of cuneiform tablets buried deep beneath layers of silt, their language silenced in spoken form, becoming an obscure, learned tongue known only to a dwindling circle of scholars. By the dawn of the Common Era, the very existence of Sumer, the original civilization, was almost entirely forgotten, its profound contributions subsumed into the broader, seemingly anonymous narrative of ancient Mesopotamia. The story of human civilization, as understood for centuries, began not in Sumer, but with later empires, leaving a gaping void at its true genesis then. In the mid-19th century, a new age of exploration dawned, fueled by a thirst for biblical archaeology and a burgeoning academic curiosity. European explorers, diplomats, and adventurers ventured into the arid lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, seeking traces of ancient Assyria and Babylonia, lands mentioned in Scripture. What they uncovered would not only rewrite the history of these familiar empires, but would ultimately unearth a civilization far older, far more foundational than anyone had ever imagined. The first significant breakthroughs came with the discovery and excavation of Assyrian cities like Nineveh and Nimrud by figures like Austin Henry Layard. These sites yielded colossal statues, magnificent palaces, and, crucially, vast libraries filled with tens of thousands of clay tablets inscribed with a strange, wedge-shaped script, cuneiform. But the language remained a mystery, an impenetrable puzzle. The intellectual triumph of deciphering cuneiform was a monumental undertaking, an incredible feat of linguistic detective work that rivaled the cracking of the Rosetta Stone. Key figures like Henry Rawlinson, working on the trilingual Behistun inscription high on a cliff face in Persia, painstakingly translated Old Persian, then Elamite, and finally the challenging Akkadian, which provided the gateway to understanding other cuneiform languages. By the 1850s, the first major texts were being read, revealing histories, myths, and administrative records of ancient empires. Then, in 1872, a young, self-taught Assyriologist named George Smith, working at the British Museum, made a discovery that electrified the world. A tablet from Nineveh containing a narrative remarkably similar to the biblical flood story. It was written in Akkadian, but closer examination revealed references to much older Sumerian tales, hinting at a civilization preceding the Assyrians and Babylonians. This was the first concrete clue that an even earlier culture had existed, the true source of many Mesopotamian traditions. The confirmation of Sumer's existence, and the subsequent revelation of its unparalleled achievements, came through systematic archaeological excavations in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. French archaeologists, notably Ernest de Sarzeck at Tello, ancient Lagash, in the 1870s, began unearthing statues and tablets written in a language that was neither Akkadian nor Semitic. It was a new, distinct language, and the text spoke of kings and cities previously unknown. These discoveries provided the first undeniable evidence of the Sumerian people. But it was the monumental work of British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley at between 1922 and 1934 that truly brought Sumer to life, captivating the public imagination and fundamentally reshaping our understanding of early civilization. Woolley unearthed the spectacular Great Ziggurat of a testament to Sumerian architectural genius and religious devotion. He also discovered the royal tombs of a treasure trove of gold, lapis lazuli, and intricate craftsmanship, providing an astonishingly rich glimpse into the wealth, artistic sophistication, and even the macabre sacrificial rituals of Sumerian royalty around 2600 BCE. These excavations, alongside those at Uruk, Kish, and other sites, unveiled not just ruins, but entire cities, meticulously planned and vibrantly alive, demonstrating an astonishing level of urban complexity millennia before anywhere else on Earth. The rediscovery of Sumer was nothing short of a paradigm shift. It forced scholars to completely redraw the timeline of human civilization, pushing back the origins of urbanism, writing, law, and complex governance by more than 1,000 years. For generations, the Western intellectual tradition had often placed the genesis of civilization in Greece or Rome, with Egypt as a venerable precursor. Sumer revealed a much deeper, more fundamental source in Mesopotamia. It demonstrated that humanity's first great leap was not a gradual evolution across many cultures, but a concentrated explosion of innovation in a specific time and place. The meticulous cuneiform archives, containing everything from sophisticated mathematical tables and astronomical observations to epic poems and detailed administrative records, unveiled a people of extraordinary intellectual prowess and organizational genius, laying the groundwork for much that we take for granted today. Furthermore, the Sumerian texts provided startling connections to narratives long thought to be unique to later cultures. The discovery of the Sumerian flood story and its more developed Akkadian counterpart in the Epic of Gilgamesh provided a profound cultural echo to the biblical account of Noah. While not historical proof for either, it revealed a shared cultural memory, a profound mythic narrative that resonated across diverse peoples of the ancient Near East, testifying to the enduring power of storytelling and perhaps to shared environmental experiences. Similarly, parallels could be drawn between Sumerian creation myths, descriptions of a primeval paradise, and later traditions, underscoring Sumer's role as a deep wellspring of narrative and religious thought that influenced millennia of human belief. Sumer's legacy is not merely a collection of isolated achievements. It is the very blueprint of civilization itself. Consider the three pillars upon which modern society stands, each rooted deeply in Sumerian soil. Firstly, writing, their enduring gift of cuneiform, transformed ephemeral speech into permanent record, making complex administration, law, history, and literature possible. It allowed knowledge to accumulate and be transmitted across generations, fundamentally altering human consciousness and ushering in the historical era. Secondly, the city, their invention of sophisticated urban living, with its specialized labor, intricate social hierarchies, and monumental public works, provided the template for human congregation. An organized society, a model that continues to define our world today. Thirdly, law and governance, their pioneering efforts in codified law, centralized administration, and the concept of divine kingship, established the frameworks for ordering human relations, protecting justice, and exercising authority on a societal scale, principles that continue to resonate in legal and political systems across the globe. Beyond these core contributions, Sumer bequeathed to us the fundamental tools for understanding our world: the sexagesimal number system that dictates our measurement of time and angles, the earliest advancements in astronomy that charted the heavens, and ingenious engineering solutions like large-scale irrigation that allowed societies to thrive in challenging environments. The Epic of Gilgamesh, a Sumerian tale, remains a timeless meditation on friendship, mortality, and the search for meaning, a literary masterpiece that speaks to the universal human condition, from the quiet ingenuity of the Ubaid farmers cultivating marshlands to the colossal ambition of Uruk's first cities, from the internecine conflicts of the early dynastic kings to the imperial vision of Sargon and the administrative marvel of Ur-3. Sumer was a ceaseless laboratory of human endeavor. Its ultimate political decline was not an end, but a transformation, its vibrant culture absorbed, its language preserved in sacred texts, and its ideas woven inextricably into the tapestry of successor civilizations. The Sumerians did not merely exist. They created the very grammar of civilization, providing the essential vocabulary and syntax that allowed future empires to write their own stories. They laid the foundations so deep that they were forgotten, yet their spirit continued to underpin the vast structures built upon them today. The excavated ruins of Sumer stand as powerful, silent witnesses to this genesis. They are a profound reminder that everything we consider civilized, our cities, our laws, our writing, our quest for knowledge, our complex social structures began with them. The Sumerians, the people of the black-headed ones, the inhabitants of the land between the rivers, achieved something truly revolutionary. They didn't just build a civilization, they invented it. And in doing so, they gifted us the very story of ourselves. Their voice, once silenced by time and sand, now echoes across millennia, a powerful, enduring testament to the human spirit's boundless capacity for innovation and creation. We are all, in a fundamental way, inheritors of Sumer, and their story is ultimately the beginning of our own. The dust of their cities may lie scattered, but their legacy flows through the very currents of human history, an immortal river of ideas,